Welcome back, board members. It's time for another Shelf Talk episode where I take a game off my shelf and I talk about it. Today's game, the two-player game, Oshi. Oshi is a great, little known about two-player game. Plays a little bit like chess, not at all like checkers. It is on a 9x9 grid where one player takes the oxblood or red color, the other one takes the ivory or white color token, or pawns, or pieces, in this case buildings, pagodas, and they kind of fight each other for influence. We'll talk about that when we get down to the table, look at the rules, and show you how to win in Oshi. All right, first things first, we always want to talk about the components. There are only 5 components if you include the game box. So let's start with the game box. One game box. Then you have a solid wooden board. Very nice. Polished, it's a 9x9 grid. Then you have the oxblood pieces and the ivory pieces. The pieces consist of little pagodas or buildings of 1 story here, 2 story here, and 3 story on the corners here. Each opponent has the same number of pieces in the same configuration, 1 story, 2 story, 3 story. In a game of Oshi, what you're trying to do is move your pieces about the board only in a straight line and only as far as the number of stories your building is. So a building size 1 can move 1 space, a building that's 2 stories can move 2 spaces, and a building that's 3 stories can move 3 spaces. Now the catch in this game, where it talks about influence, is the size of your building also relates to how many pieces it can push along the path. You can only go forward and backward, left and right. You can never go diagonal. So in this particular case, this building can move forward 1, and your opponent could move this one forward 1, pushing the one in front of it 1. This particular building could move over 1, but not another because there are 3 buildings it would have to push out of its way. Your opponent could then move here, and you then could move here, and your opponent could move this piece here. This is where it gets pretty interesting. This building can now push 2 pieces up to 2 spaces. So 1, 2, like so. Thus keeping this piece from pushing because it can't push 3 buildings. However, this building can push this building 1 space. Wouldn't recommend it because then this can push this 1 space also. So you can see it's a lot of pushing and shoving and moving back and forth, etc. If this were my size 3 building, this is where the object of the game comes in, and it were my turn as the red player, I could push 1, 2, 3 spaces, scoring me 2 points. 1 point for each story the pagoda that I pushed off the board has. The object of the game? Push 7 points or stories worth of pagodas, of your opponent's pagodas, off the board. That's it. There's not much more, actually there is no more to the game of Oshi. From then it's all about strategy, watching your opponents, paying attention to where your influence is, where do you have more pagodas in line than they do, how can you push more pieces off the board or push more pieces around to block your opponent's movements, etc. That's it. That's a game of Oshi. So let's get back to the top of the table, and I'll tell you my final thoughts. I've liked Oshi since the day it came out. I've played a lot of it. Back when my wife and I ran a game store, we played a ton. We shared it a ton. We demoed it a ton. This game, I mean, you just saw how simple, as far as the rules go, how simple a game it is to play, how simple a game it is to learn. Again, much like chess, where you've probably played a game of chess or two, moving pieces across the board that move in different configurations. In this game, you only move forward, backward, left, or right. It just depends on how tall your pagoda is, which determines how far you can move forward, backward, left, and right, and how many pieces you can push forward, backward, left, and right. Doesn't matter the size of the pieces that you're pushing, it's just the number of pieces that you're pushing. I think it's a great, quick, 2-player game. It's one of those games you're like, oh, let's play it again. Oh, let's play it again. You can get a few good plays in like 30 minutes. You could probably play 2 to 3 games depending on how how thoughtful you're taking your turns. A lot of times there are just obvious moves. And I think if there were one thing that I would say, I don't know, it's not super negative about the game, but if it weren't super positive, it would be that sometimes there are moves that are just, you have to take a certain move to keep yourself from losing the game. If you have a size 3 pagoda that's hanging out on the edge of the board and anybody's near it, any opponent is near it, you're going to want to move that pagoda off the edge because you don't want your opponents moving it off the edge. They will score it. So that's what I think about Oshi. Have you played Oshi? I don't know that it's in print anymore, so I don't just want to cover in print games. I do want to cover some of the out-of-print games because I think they're worth mentioning, and Oshi is definitely one of them. I'm curious if you've ever played it, or if you haven't, I'm curious what you think about it. Please leave a comment below about your thoughts on Oshi. Simple game. Thanks so much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you like this content, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Every little bit helps. I do appreciate it. Maybe even ring that notification bell and get notified when I put out more Shelf Talk, 2-Player Tuesdays, and Solo Play Mondays. As always, I'll see you at the next boardroom meeting.